Shalom. I want to give all praises and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakha Kodash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned the truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahweh Shai is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahweh Shai. And pretty much I'm just continuing on my series. In this lesson, I'll be going over Second Corinthians, the 10th chapter, which pretty much deals with being spiritual and Apostle Paul validating his apostleship, his authority. All right. So what inspired me to do this is because, you can get caught up in prophecy, in which we're supposed to do that. Everything is prophetic, but ultimately you still have to study and you still have to read, and you have to understand this gospel and the correct doctrine for yourself. Once again, it's good to hit particular precepts, but it's nice to, read the chapters, all right? Because that's something that a lot of Israelites, they don't really do that. They'll hit a bunch of precepts, but then they won't understand the particular chapter, all right? So without further ado, let's get into it. So this is Second Corinthians chapter 10, and I'm gonna start at verse 1. And like I said, I may or may not segue between the KJV to the NLT. So in the KJV, the headline, meaning the subject matter of the first couple of verses, this is dealing with Paul describes himself. When you go to the NLT version, it says Paul defends his authority. All right, making up with what I said earlier. So Second Corinthians 10 and 1, it says, excuse me, it says, now I, Paul, myself beseech you by the meekness and gentleness of Hamashiach, who in presence am base among you, but being absent and bold toward you. Let's read that in the NLT, more simplified. Second Corinthians 10 and 1. It says, now I, Paul, appeal to you with the gentleness and kindness of Hamashiach, though I realize you think I am timid in person and bold only when I write from far away, right? Because most of Apostle Paul's epistles, that's exactly what it is. It's letters, because he was dealing with persecution. He had to travel all around Asia Minor to the uncircumcision, which is the Israelites and the Gentile state of mind. So he was either always on the move or being persecuted or locked up, right? Locked up in the stocks, which the stocks is jail or prison, right? Verse 2. It says, but I beseech you that I may not be bold when I am present with that confidence wherewith I think to be bold against some. It says, when I think of us as if we walked according to the flesh. Let's read that in the NLT, 2 Corinthians 10 and 2. It says, well, I am begging you now so that when I come, I won't have to be bold with those that think we act from human motives. So you have particular Israelites that thought Apostle Paul, he was only bold in his letters as far as, correction and rebuking Israelites, especially those in Corinth, Greece, because if you know the history, Corinth, Greece, ultimately, there was a lot of gods that was being worshipped there. There was a lot of paganism that was going on there. And you had a lot of Israelites that got caught up in worshiping the Roman gods, as well as the captivity before they was Hellenized under the Greek Empire, the Greek captivity. So Apostle Paul, he had a hard time dealing with those Israelites that was in Corinth, Greece, because they would backslide a lot. All right. They would do things that go against the law, statutes, and commandments. And Apostle Paul, to the best of his abilities through the Spirit, he would try to keep them in the Spirit by reminding them, look, you cannot be backsliding and following paganism. You can't be doing what the average Corinthian citizen is doing, being involved in paganism, right? So now That's let me read it again. NLT, it says, well, I am begging you now so that when I come, I won't have to be bored with those that think we act from human motives. Verse 3, it says, for though we walk in the flesh, meaning the human body, we do not war after the flesh. So this is the mindset of a man of the Lord, because there's a difference between self-defense and a person being carnal. Somebody that's self-defending themselves, they're self-defending themselves from a particular situation that they didn't start, like a fight or whatever it is. And you have to defend yourself or you're going to get harmed. All right. So there's nothing wrong with self-defense. If your life is on the line, if somebody, attempts to try and hit you first, so even if they spit on you, you have the right to, do what you got to do to them. All right. So Paul is saying, but we don't think like that though. We don't war after the flesh, because being the Israelite is not about, all the camps got to come together and this is the military now and we're going to take over the Edomite infrastructure. No, no, no. That would be going against the scriptures. Because what does it say? Zephaniah 3 and 8. Yahweh said to wait upon Yahweh till he rise up to the prey, which is the 17 heathen nations, mainly Esau, Edom, to fulfill Daniel's second chapter. Because what nation, pursuant to 2nd Ezra 6 and 9, Daniel the second chapter, towards the end of the chapter, what nation is prophesied to be in rulership? The revived Roman Empire. What nation was ruling over the Roman Empire? The Edomites, the so-called white man in the sea line. And we understand that the seed is the sperm. Men are the progenitors of life. Men carry the seed. So every individual on the planet Earth comes from one of the 18 nations that was established after the flood, which is the first death. All right. So the chosen nation, the seed of the promise, whose salvation is for, who the blood of sacrifice, of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, which his real name is Yahweh died for, is who? The Israelites, which today the Israelites, due to the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28, were being called bywords, were being called names outside of who we actually are. All right. We're being called so-called Negroes or black, Hispanic, Native American Indian, and different other bywords. All right. So continuing on. So that's the chosen nation. And then you got the 17 heathen nations that are not chosen, whom salvation is not for. Continuing on. So it says, we do not war after the flesh, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. Let's go into this word carnal. I just want to see what it says. In the Greek, this is the word for carnal. Strong's G 4559.
Strong's G 4559. Sarkikos. Sarkikos.
Right? It says fleshly, carnal. It says having the nature of the flesh, i.e., under the control of the animal appetites or appetites, right? So pretty much should just react based off of instinct without being logical. All right. When you being carnal, you're not being spiritual. You're not being logical. You're just reacting like how an animal acts based off of instinct, right? Oh, this person cursed at me, or they're speaking, vulgar, harsh language and being aggressive. Although they didn't hit me, I feel the energy that this person hate me, so I'm just gonna hit them first. That's like being carnal, you know. If you being spiritual and you're not warring after the flesh, you're logical. You think about, I know I could fuck this person up, but that wouldn't be the smart thing to do. It's just best for me to just walk away and take the low. And that's why I brought up self-defense. All right. Self-defense is different. Self-defense, once again, is when somebody is trying to inflict harm on you. You didn't start it. You probably quiet. Maybe that's angering them more. And now they attempt to want to get your attention by either spitting on you or wanting to hit you first. All right. Then you can self-defend yourself. That's different. That's not being carnal. Right. But you have people that react like animals. Oh, this person looked at me funny, so now I gotta press them and hit them, right? And then they regret it later. Some people they die because they're carnal, right? A lot of people die because they're carnal. They get thrown in jail, prison, federal prison, right? State prison. Continuing on, it says governed by mere human nature, not by the spirit of the Most High. So somebody that's carnal, they don't have the Holy Spirit with them. They're not logical in their reasoning. They're not logical in their conduct. They just go out like an animal. They think that they could kick anybody ass, maybe because of their rep, maybe because they're in a gang, maybe because they feel like they go to the gym. So they just think like they could just kick anybody's ass until you mess with the wrong person. And the wrong person could be smaller than you. All right. But the Most High could give them the power to embarrass you or do worse. So you got to be careful. And there's been accounts of particular, Israelite men that they were carnal and they got fucked up. I'm talking about in this lifetime. So you got to be careful. All right. And the worst thing you could try and do is offend one of the Lord's little ones by trying to challenge a man of the Lord to the fight. And he don't want to fight you. Not because he's scared of you, but because, you're supposed to be a brother. And once you cross those lines, it's just a matter of time before the Lord fucks you up or takes his spirit from you, or even worse, kills you. All right. And I know two examples from my own testimonies with that. Continuing on, it says, having its seat in the animal nature or aroused by the animal nature. So you have particular people, they react like animals. They act like animals. When an animal is angry, an animal is scared, is startled, it's hard to calm an animal down because its emotions, its instinct has engulfed them. All right. So they're not logical. You can't communicate with particular individuals like that. It's just like a woman that she weaponizes her emotions, over you. And when she don't hear what she wants to hear, when she feels like she's not being defended, now she starts crying. She gets loud because she's not getting her way. It's kind of similar to a child. That's why people say things like, oh, it's a child, they don't know no better, because a child has to develop, logic, reasoning, logical conduct over time, right? And if it doesn't, what happens? It turns into a stereotype. It says human with the included idea of depravity, right? Let's go into that word depravity. So let's see what it says. Corruption, right? Moral corruption, wickedness. So it says with the included idea of depravity, which is corruption, right? So you have people that are carnal, they just intentionally go and commit a crime, right? They just intentionally kill innocent bystanders, right? They do things without reason, kind of like a murderer, right? It says pertaining to the flesh, to the body, related to birth, lineage, and that's different, all right? Because sex is carnal anyway. But it says, but mighty through the Most High to the pulling down of strongholds. And what would be the strongholds? These false religions, these false doctrines, right? People's private interpretations of Bible precepts or Bible chapters. When they get it wrong, we gotta destroy that because we have to defend the gospel. If we don't do that, then the blood will be on our hands. So the scriptures say what? Even concerning Israelites that know that they're Israelites, but they may call upon the name of the Lord wrong. They may call upon the name of Yahweh wrong. They may call him Yehoshua or Joshua or whatever stupid ass name, Jesus, but his one and only name is Yahweh. Then we got to correct these people. If they don't want to be corrected, then that's on them. All right. They're being carnal by not taking in the rebuke and the correction to save their own soul. right? It says casting down imaginations, man-made religions, man-made traditions, things that do not revolve around the Bible, things that are not in the Bible, things that don't pertain to the law, statutes, and commandments, things that don't pertain to the gospel that John the Baptist taught, Yahushua taught, the 12 taught, right? It says, and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of the Most High, like these other religions, these other gods that are not gods, right? Just wood and stone. It says, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Hamashiach. Let's read in the NLT. This is NLT, 2 Corinthians 10 and verse 3. It says, we are human, but we don't wage war as humans do. This is the mindset of the elect of the nation of Israel. The mindset of the elect of the nation of Israel is to wait upon Yahweh. We realize that we're under the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28 and that no mortal man on the planet Earth can deliver us. So what are we waiting on? We're waiting for divine intervention by Yahweh, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. That's who is going to give us the power to take down our enemies. That's who's going to make us sovereign and independent as a nation and seed of people, not ourselves. You can't take the so-called white man's money that come from the central bank system that he controls and think you're going to become sovereign and independent. No, as long as you are under his system worldwide, it don't matter what language you speak, how you look, what country you flee to, you still going to be governed by his centralized banking system. So you're not sovereign and independent. The only way for us to be sovereign and independent is under our culture, under our God, under our Savior, which is Yahweh, the God of Israel, and Yahweh Shah, the Messiah. All right. We can't be sovereign and independent under the establishment of the heathen nations. It says we are human, but we do not wage war as humans do. We use the Most High's mighty weapons, going back to what? Hebrews 4 and 12, these scriptures, the Bible, the Comforter. It says not worldly weapons. We don't need guns. All right. Now, if other camps, they want to have guns, well, that's their rules and regulations, but they don't affiliate with Great Millstone. And that's what you people need to understand. Not every Hebrew Israelite camp is the same. All right. Yeah, you might see a speaker, two readers, two men on post, a guy behind the camera, but that doesn't mean that we all teach the same gospel and doctrine. Not every camp teaches the same thing. You have hirelings, you have agents, you got spies, you got agent provocateurs, right? You got false prophets in general. You got guys that are Masonic, you got guys that are cops, that's actually police, CIA, FBI, right? And all of that is going to be exposed and revealed in the times to come. All right. Continuing on. So you don't need a gun at camp. You don't need worldly weapons at camp. All right. You got the spirit of Yahweh Shai, which you have guardian angels, pursuant to Psalms the 91st chapter and Psalms 34 and 7. It says that the angels of the Lord encamp it around those that fear him. Who fears him? The elect of the nation of Israel. All right. Continuing on. It says to knock down strongholds of human reasoning and to destroy false arguments. So that's what we do. When we do videos on these people that teach false doctrine, their private interpretations of Bible scriptures, we got to destroy that because it's a lie. All right. Continuing on. It says verse 5 NLT, we destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing Yahweh and Yahweh Shai. We capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Hamashiach. And that's only for Israelites. All right. We don't care if heathen nations can't accept the gospel. The gospel is not for them. They are really sovereign and independent, got their culture, they got their way of life. If they want to follow the Edomites, let them do that. They're not the chosen people. But this message is for the Israelites. It says, yep, verse 6, and after you have become fully obedient, we will punish everyone who remains disobedient. Now let's go back. It says, Verse 7. Do ye look on the things after the outward appearance? Because that's how men normally judge people, especially a woman. You know, they'll look at you, okay, this person don't got no earrings. You know, is that cubic zirconium or is that real diamonds? Okay, look at this person's hairline, look at their hair, look at their skin. Is this person attractive? You know, what type of name brand they got on, what type of shoes they got on. Do they curse every 5 minutes? Are they elegant? Does this person go to the gym? Is he tall? Does this person have status? This is how most human beings judge other human beings on the outward appearance. But the Lord, He judges on the spirit. The Lord tells you in the Old and New Testament to not judge people on the outward appearance. And you got men in the truth that do that, right? Might see you get like a little trim and think, oh, he falling off. I'm waiting for this guy to fall off. Meanwhile, this dude is about to fall off, right? So you got to be careful on who you be judging. It says, if any man trusts to himself that he is Hamashiach, right? Meaning you belong to the Lord, you serve Yahweh, right? Let him of himself think this again, that as he is Hamashiach, even so are we Hamashiach. Let's read that at LT more simplified. This is 2 Corinthians 10:7. It says, look at the obvious facts. Those who say they belong to a Mashiach must recognize that we belong to a Mashiach as much as they do. It says, let me go back now, verse 8, for though I should boast somewhat more of our authority, which the Lord had given us for edification and not for your destruction, I should not be ashamed. It says that I may not seem as if I would terrify you by letters. Because remember, when you read in the verses above, people was acting like Apostle Paul was like a tyrant, you know, but he's not being a tyrant. He's a shepherd that's set up by Yahweh Shai, a chosen vessel at that. When you read Acts the 9th chapter. And so he was trying to get them profane Corinthians, which were Israelites in Corinth, Greece, right, to not backslide, all right, to keep the ordinances and the doctrine which they received through the Holy Spirit by the way of Apostle Paul. Let's read that in the NLT, 2 Corinthians 10:8. It says, I may seem to be boasting too much about the authority given to us by the Lord, right, Yahweh, but our authority builds you up. It doesn't tear you down. So I will not be ashamed of using my authority. Exactly. Because he's not being a tyrant. He's a leader. It says, I am not trying to frighten you by my letters. It says, let me go back to the KJV now, verse 10. It says, for his letters say they are weighty and powerful, right? That's what Peter said. It says, but his bodily presence is weak. Remember, the scriptures talk about in 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter, I believe it was. I just did a video on that. It said that Paul, he had a thorn in his flesh, meaning some type of infirmities. It could have been a sickness. It could have been some type of, who knows what it could have been. It just says thorn in the flesh. So he has some type of hindrance in his body to show what? That the spirit or the power of the Holy Spirit and the power of Yahweh and Yahweh Shai can be magnified. This gospel could be magnified in weak bodies, in this sinful, decrepit, corruptible flesh, right? It magnifies the power of the Lord, and then it stops you from being prideful in the case of Apostle Paul, all right? And then it gives you hope to what? To want those immortal bodies that don't decay, that don't break down over time like a car, right? So it says, in his speech, contemptible. It says, let such an one think this, that such as we are in the word by letters, which we are absent, such will be also indeed when we are present. It says, let me read that in the NLT now. I like to jump back and forth. 2 Corinthians 10 and 11. Matter of fact, 10 and 10, it says, for some say Paul's letters are demanding and forceful, but in person he is weak and his speeches are worthless. Those people should realize that our actions when we arrive in person will be as forceful as what we say in our letters from far away. Oh, don't worry. We wouldn't dare to say that we are as wonderful as these other men who tell you how important they are. Exactly. Because Apostle Paul, he don't do that. But he's a qualified teacher, though, right? Being raised up as a Pharisee, right? He had Yahushua come to him and teach him. He was blind for a couple of days. Then he had to go to Ananias, right? It says, but they are only comparing themselves with each other, right? Using themselves as the standard of measurement. How ignorant, referring to these false prophets, guys that seek vainglory, guys that tell you, oh, keep the law, but they can't keep the law perfectly, right? A dude to tell you in this lifetime, grow a beard, and then when you look at this nigga, you like, what the fuck? Like, why the fuck you don't got a damn beard? You see what I'm saying? So, gotta be careful of these false prophets. Verse 13, it says, but we will not boast of things without our measurement, but according to the measure of the rule which the Most High have distributed to us, a measure to reach even unto you. Let's read that in the NLT, 2 Corinthians 10, and let's see. Yep, 2 Corinthians 10 and 13. It says, we will not boast about things done outside our area of authority. So that's what he's referring to in the KJV. We will boast only about what has happened within the boundaries of the work the Most High has given us, which includes our working with you, right? So he could boast in that he's a man of the Lord, right? It says, for we stretch not ourselves beyond our measure, as though we reach not unto you, for we are come as far as to you also in preaching the gospel of Mashiach, not boasting of things without our measure, that is of men's labors, but having hope when your faith is increased, that we shall be enlarged by you according to our rule abundantly, to preach the gospel in the regions beyond you, and not boast in another man's line of things made ready to our hand. It says, but he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord, for not he that commendeth himself is approved, but whom the Lord commendeth. All right. Let me finish that off in the NLT. This is 2 Corinthians 10 and 2 Corinthians 10 and let's see. I'll just read 18. It says, when people commend themselves, it doesn't count for much. The important thing is for the Lord to commend them. All right. So that's the point. Everything that you're doing in the truth as far as doing the work, that's what you want. You want to be one of the men that Ezra seen in his vision being crowned on Mount Zion. All right. You want to be, bowing down before Yahushua, and he places that crown on your head. That's what you're hoping for. All right, to be a part of the elect. So Lord willing, you was edified. Shalom.